Let's pause here. Look at Peter's hand, which instinctively forms a gesture as if he's about to shoot a web. Although he doesn't use it immediately after jumping, he prepares his fingers to reduce reaction time if he needs to use it later. Miles, at the end of the movie, despite growing into the role of Spider-Man, still doesn't have the reflex developed. This leads me to think that what's at play here is nothing but Peter's muscle memory, which instinctively positions his hand in that way while swinging. During the intro, we see Parker looking at himself in the mirror. For a split second, he connects with Miles. This is the first glimpse showing us the concept of the multiverse. Remember the number 42 because it's an incredibly important element of Into the Spider-Verse. We'll come back to it later in the material. Spider-Man from Miles' world bears a striking resemblance to the one portrayed by Tobey Maguire, and the actions that befall him are an obvious reference to the films directed by Sam Raimi, the interrupted date with MJ, the train stop kiss, or even the emo dance. In this universe, Peter decided to capitalize on his brand. That's why comics, cereal, and even carols started to emerge. You can see the text of one of them here. What's most interesting is that it's a parody of a real song called Baby It's Cold Outside, not Spidey It's Cold Outside. When he says there's only one Spider-Man, 7 pigeons fly past him. It's no coincidence that exactly the same number of other versions of Spider-Man appear in this movie. When we meet Miles, he hums the song Sunflower by Sway Lee and Post Malone. What's funniest is that he mispronounces one word, and instead of ride, he says drive. This was changed due to the age category, but it's done so seamlessly that it looks like a natural mistake. Brilliant. Morales' room is full of brilliant details. For example, the poster he hangs on the wall clearly depicts a superhero with a cape. We don't have a full view, but it perfectly connects to a later scene where he puts on a cape for his Spider-Man costume. Now we know what inspired him. It seems to me that this poster could be his Spider-Man suit project. In the background, we see his red Jordans, and here is a design resembling Batman if he were a Minecraft skin. But most interestingly, he previously drew a mech that immediately brings Transformers to mind. Here, Miles taps his throat with a marker, accompanied by lines. Notice that these are made to mimic the style of writing with a black marker, which the character holds. On the door frame in the Miles house, we can see lines showing his growth. Here he was 6, here 10, and this is how tall he is now. Measurements were taken every year. During Morales' journey to school on the TV, we can see news about Spider-Man, but the more interesting thing is on the ticker. Bitcoin reaches new high with futures market entry. This relates perfectly to reality. In January 2018, the price of Bitcoin reached its historic peak, hitting around $20,000 per coin. Then, there was a significant correction, and the price dropped in the following months. By March 2018, it was already $10,000. The whole year of 2018 was a period of great uncertainty and volatility in the cryptocurrency market. Many factors contributed to the price decline, such as government regulations, security and privacy issues, and overall cryptocurrency market volatility. With this information, we can roughly determine when the movie's action takes place. On the backpack, we can notice the inscription Brooklyn, which emphasizes the love the protagonist holds for this place. The creators skillfully depicted the differences between the old and new school in one sequence. Notice that during the walk, Miles passes by the old school, where he chats with each buddy, and they respond normally. People's attitude there is different, but when he tries to do the same at the new school, he's mostly ignored and considered weird. Miles carries over behaviors from the old school to the new one, but unfortunately, they don't work. The girl points out his untied shoes, and he responds that it's a style and does it on purpose. He starts tying his Jordans only after the incident of tripping on the roof. As he grows into the role of Spider-Man, his shoelaces are tied. On the board, we can see the inscription, All Men Are Mortal, which is a translation of Simone de Beauvoir's 1946 novel, Tous les hommes sont mortels. It tells the story of Raymond Fosca, a cursed man who lives forever. On the other hand, the book Great Expectations was written by Charles Dickens and is a key element of the film Into the Spider-Verse. Miles has to write an essay about it, and the graffiti he paints with his uncle refers to it. But instead of Great Expectations, they write No Expectation. It perfectly reflects the mood of the main character, who has to live up to others' expectations and become the hero New York deserves. In the end, he manages to write the essay. During the scene in the movie theater, in the exam results, Morales marks all the wrong answers to get kicked out of school. You probably missed that he even misspelled the name of the month. December? It's spelled December. Gwen appears on the screen for the first time. Notice how the creators cleverly highlight her to be the first one to catch the eye. Furthermore, the movie being shown is about Olivia Octavius, one of the villains in this movie. She talks in the background about the theme of the movie, which is the multiverse, and Miles deliberately blocks her name with his body so that the viewer doesn't immediately realize that she has the same surname as the iconic Spider-Man villain. Staying with Olivia, the fact that she's evil is hinted at several times in the movie. During the intro, we see Peter fighting her. On the table in her laboratory, we see one of the tentacles, and most interestingly, there are octagons everywhere, suggesting her surname. Here, and here. Overwhelmed by the new environment, Miles visits his uncle Aaron Davis, who turns out to be the Prowler, one of Kingpin's henchmen. The creators hint at his hidden identity from the beginning. His apartment is full of purple elements, just like this painting, and even the LED lamp shines purple. Let's take a closer look at this photo. It depicts Uncle Aaron as a boxer in purple colors. It shows us that his skills didn't come out of nowhere, and in the past, he fought in the ring. However, that's not the most interesting part. Aaron Davis is also an American boxer and a former WBA world champion in the welterweight division. He shares the same first name as Miles's uncle, so the boxing poster perfectly pays homage to the athlete. As his funny wallpaper, Davis has an old photo with his brother. Furthermore, Jefferson also has an old photo with his brother set up. By this maneuver, the creators show us that despite their feud, they still hold brotherly love for each other. On the TV, an episode of the show Community is playing where Donald Glover gets out of bed in a Spider-Man suit. Donald Glover portrayed Aaron Davis in Spider-Man Homecoming. Interesting cross-referencing of plots. Stop. Look who we have here. For literally a fraction of a second, we can see Stan Lee on the train. He's also present at the end of the movie on the train and acts as a cashier in the costume shop and at the crosswalk. Here. Through this simple gate, we are shown how Miles' strength grows. At the beginning, when he goes there with his uncle, he struggles to get through. In a later stage, when he's fleeing from the Prowler, he does it almost reflexively. While painting, a spider sneaks up on Miles. We can notice the number 42 on it, which, as I mentioned earlier, is very significant for the movie. It appears in the lottery pool at the beginning of the film. The spider has the number 42 written on it. The suit Morales buys from Stan Lee costs $42. The bus can only accommodate 42 people, and when Spidey falls off the roof, the taxi's sign breaks so that it forms the number 42. And even the weight in Aaron's apartment is 2 and 4. What does this mean? Let me tell you. References to the number 42 throughout the Spider-Verse are in honor of Jackie Robinson, the first African-American Major League Baseball player, whose jersey number was indeed 42. It's worth looking into the glitching of the spider. This means it comes from a completely different universe. Therefore, there's a theory about the film Through the Multiverse, which is hitting theaters soon, that this is the reason why other Spider-Men are chasing Miles. The mystery is how the spider found its way into Morales' world, and Across the Spider-Verse will be the key to solving this puzzle. Notice that the spider adapts its color to the surface it's on. It camouflages like a chameleon so the boys don't notice it. This spider's ability foreshadows Miles becoming invisible. Spider-Man inherits its powers. After being bitten, we get a time-lapse of the room. The contrast between our hero and his roommate is great. The school they attend is very difficult, and when Miles couldn't care less and sleeps, his buddy stays up all night with energy drinks, cramming knowledge. He takes a little break to tidy up and read a Spider-Man comic. It beautifully illustrates Miles' approach to education. Now let's move on to one of my favorite details in the movie. I love how Spider-Sense is shown here. The animation, although designed like a comic from the start, only introduces texts or characteristic speech bubbles after being bitten by the spider. They illustrate Miles' thoughts and present them as if he were the narrator of the story. Annotations warn him of danger or depict his screams. They are perfectly woven into the visual animation and also have a narrative purpose. It's something beautiful. The influence of the spider sense on the hero is also well depicted. When he first enters the school and is ignored by others, it seems to roll off him because he doesn't pay attention to their reactions. After sharpening his senses, he hears every whisper and is no longer as self-assured. During the escape, we see a shot of the room. Here, we can notice a portrait of Mozart, the Austrian composer. While riding the train to his uncle's, Morales looks through the contacts on his phone. There are plenty of names and initials of people associated with this version of Spider-Man. Brian Michael Bendis, an American comic book writer and illustrator, together with Sarah Pichelli, created Brooklyn's Spider-Man. Monica Chang is a comic book character who at some point became the director of SHIELD. Benjamin P. sounds like a reference to Benjamin Parker, Uncle Ben. Cindy M. refers to a Marvel Comics character, Cindy Moon. who is known as Silk. Jason Reynolds is the author of the comic book Miles Morales' Spider-Man from 2017. Morales accidentally finds himself in the midst of Peter's fight with Fisk. Just before the train hits the window, the message, "Look out," appears behind the hero. This is the action of his spider sense, but notice that at this point wavy patterns appear, which directly illustrate the spider sense. Since Miles is only just discovering this ability, the patterns are solely black. Later on, they also have a red hue. The fight between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin is the perfect moment to talk about one of the animation techniques. Into the Spider-Verse is amazing in this regard because it defines a completely new style. It combines previously known techniques, adds a lot of its own, and makes the film the most beautiful animation on the market. What's so special about it? An important element is the lack of motion blur. This refers to visible streaks of moving objects in a photo or sequence of frames. It's added to smooth out motion and mask the lack of animation frames. Spider-Verse utilizes a technique called smearing. Smearing has its roots in old cartoons and involves drawing repeating elements to add dynamism to the image. Furthermore, the three-dimensional image is enriched with lines or dots, giving it a hand-drawn style. Notice that the creators use simple lines in place of shadows, and light and gradient are illustrated through dots. Kingpin activates the machine, causing the worlds to merge. On this map, we can see exactly which Earths are colliding with each other. The original Spider-Man dies, and Miles returns to his family home. There, a particular sentence is uttered. The scene later shows that his father doesn't really mean it.
You really hate Spider-Man?
Yeah.
When he watches the news about Peter's death, his face shows distress. Morales slips off the roof and we see the text "Ah" on the screen. It resonates well with the scene at the end of the movie, where the text "Woo" appears at the same spot. The fall also reminds me of the iconic My Back, My Back. Unfortunately, the chip is damaged. Let's stop here. There's a mini logo of a red spider on a black background on the flash drive. This is exactly the color scheme the boy chooses when adjusting his costume. Perhaps this little red spider was his inspiration. Finally, Peter B. Parker appears on the screen presenting his backstory. During the fight with the villains, he is hit by a bus, oddly driven by Tombstone, one of Kingpin's henchmen. It's an easily overlooked detail, but quite interesting. Oh, and there goes another back injury. For the first time, we see the Universal Lobby, as I'll call it, which is the area between dimensions. We see all the timelines and worlds here, connected by lines. From the perspective shown, it looks like an extensive spiderweb. Do you see it? Let's watch Peter's impact on the ground in slow motion. Oh, here. At this moment, he loses his shoes. That's why he later has to walk in sweats and sneakers. In the Spider-Man universe, Stephen Curry is a golfer, not a basketball player like in our world. During B. Parker's conversation with Miles, we have such a shot. On the left side, you can notice a guy who is watching the Spider-Men while drinking coffee. It's hard to notice, but the guy spills the coffee on himself. The Spider-Men sneak into the lab and steal the necessary data. The mission doesn't go as planned, and a thrilling chase through the forest ensues. During it, I'd like to draw attention to the frame rate, or frames per second, FPS. Into the Spider-Verse uses Animation Technica on 2S, which means mixing 24 frames with 12. It's not randomly used. During the scene of swinging through the trees, Miles can't do it well yet, so he's animated at 12 frames per second, unlike B. Parker, who's already at 24 FPS. When Morales masters swinging well, the fluidity of his animation increases. Brilliant. At this point, in the background, we can see that Spider-Gwen is already helping them. When Gwen introduces herself, we can see the lizard who, at Gwen's place, isn't Dr. Connors, but Peter Parker. We can notice scales on his body, characteristic of reptiles. A great detail is on the hat, which gets pierced by a bullet. Literally, in one frame, we see an animated hole. The heroes meet Aunt May, who shows them Peter's base. There, we can see the weights Spider-Man has to train with to make progress. It's hard to count, but there are many. The most important element of the headquarters is the costume exhibition. The one on the left is from the Marvel's Spider-Man game from 2018. Unfortunately, the suit in the middle is missing, because that's the one Parker died in during the fight with Kingpin. The creators thought of everything. On the right, we can see one with a cape. It's probably a reference to Peter Strange, who wore a cape from Doctor Strange. Miles admires one of the suits, and the reflection in the glass is roughly at neck level. It's not a coincidence that when Miles grows into the role of Spider-Man, his face in the reflection matches the mask. It literally shows us that Morales has grown into the role. We're shown a group of antagonists. Most of them appeared earlier in the movie, but not this guy. This photo is very important because it presents a character named The Rose, who in the comics was Richard Fisk, Kingpin's son. It's just a wink, because we know that in this universe, Richard was still a teenager. Just before the new Spider-Men appear, Miles' spider sense works worse than Gwen's or Peter's. The waves appear above his head a bit later. The new characters are Peter Porker, a cartoon version of Spider-Ham, Spider-Noir, a detective straight out of a 1950s movie made in full noir style. Sharp shadows, a narrator or monochrome, and Penny, a Japanese girl, animated in manga or anime style. It must have required so much work to merge all these styles into one brilliantly looking film. Notice that Porker is accompanied by sounds straight from cartoons. On the other hand, the slowest spider sense of the trio belongs to the pig. Notice that the wavy lines above his head appear last. In his introduction, you can find boxes with the label Fisk Industries. As you can see, he has had dealings with Kingpin in the past. After a little spider quarrel, Miles wants to contact his uncle. Notice that the wallpaper on his phone features graffiti they did together at the beginning of the movie. In his father's contacts, we can see Steve Ditko, an American comic book author. He's the creator and co-creator with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Prowler returns home and starts investigating it. At this point, we can notice the Maneki Neko, a figurine with a cat beckoning with its paw. If the animal raises its right paw, it's supposed to attract money. If it's the left paw, it's supposed to invite guests or customers inside. Here we see it moving its left paw. Prowler catches Morales, and a chase ensues. At one point, Spidey is almost hit by Red X, the local FedEx equivalent. However, if we pause at this moment, we notice that pedestrians have a green light. It's the courier's fault for crossing the lanes when they have a red light. So it's no wonder that Miles wants to run across the road first and then turn. Interesting. Notice that at this point, the spider model reverts to the sketch stage. Fisk's team tracks down where the spider people are hiding. An epic fight scene takes place in Aunt May's living room. Let's slow down and notice how thoughtfully Prowler fights. The first thing he does is disable B. Parker's arm so he can't use the web. Great detail. Jefferson gets information about the fight and rushes to the scene of the crime. A detail in this scene concerns the traffic lights. In one of the early scenes, he said he's not the kind of cop who runs red lights.
Oh my gosh, don't cops run red lights?
Well, yeah, some do. But, not your dad.
Notice that when he turns on the siren and rushes to the crime scene, all the traffic lights on the road are green. It's also worth noting the license plate of the police car. It's RFD 960. Detectives in the Law & Order series had exactly the same plates. Prowler learns Miles' identity and unfortunately dies at the hands of Fisk. The hero runs to his room, where the rest of the team shows up. The roommate returns to the room and starts reading a comic book. Notice that it's titled More Than One Spider-Man. It's probably not a coincidence that he's reading such a comic when there are 6 different versions of Spider-Man on his ceiling. I told you that the number 42 is important. It's also on the machine from poster 2085. On another poster, we see the date December 17th. What does it mean? Well, 3 years later, on exactly December 17th, 2021, Spider-Man No Way Home debuted, which had the multiverse as its main theme. It's mind-boggling how everything is connected. Let's fast forward to the final action. All the Spider-Men arrive at the scene by bus. As you can see, each of them adheres to the principle B. Parker talked about.
Keep your legs fresh. You're gonna thank me later.
All the spiders glitch because of their lack of belonging to a specific universe. Each of them, except Noir, shimmers in many colors. Since he comes from a black and white world, he also glitches in black and white. Miles comes to help in his brand new suit. Notice how at this moment, the movements of Peter and Morales are synchronized. Master and apprentice, let's stop here. Notice that he throws a car from his world at him. Notice how our hero gets to the port on the flash drive. He grabs onto the iron tube with his adhesive palm and rises with it. He didn't come up with it himself. He took the trick from Spider-Man and the action from the beginning of the movie. Brilliant detail. He plugs in the data and starts sending the characters back to their dimensions. Notice that the device interface is in Japanese, because it was the first to connect to Penny Parker's universe. After a moment, everyone returns to their worlds and Miles is left with only one thing, or rather, defeating Fisk. They fight on a train, and I must admit that this fight is awesome. If we slow down, we clearly see that the multiverse is going crazy, and the train changes decor every now and then. Japanese Metro, a train from the 50s, and so on. Kingpin sees different versions of his family. For a moment, a black family flashes, which refers to the movie Daredevil with Ben Affleck, where Wilson Fisk was black. For a moment, Daredevil himself, aka Matt Murdock, also appears. Unfortunately, Spidey loses to Fisk in a one-on-one fight, but he sees his father, which allows him to get up and finish Fisk with lightning bolts. I think this scene has a bit more depth. The last words Jefferson says to his son are as follows. I think when Miles looks at his father in the face of death, these words come to his mind.
I see this spark in you. It's amazing. It's why I push you, but it's yours.
and that spark causes Morales to finally master electricity. It's just my theory, but it sounds very credible to me. Fisk is defeated, and on the note it says, "Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man," which is Spider-Man's famous catchphrase. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the analysis of Across the Spider-Verse.